Okay, here we go. Awesome. Okay, here we go. Great. Welcome everyone. I don't know what's going on today. Today is yeah. Sorry guys, we have started a little bit late, like 2 minutes late, but thank you for joining. We are on again this Wednesday evening. And I'm really glad to be having this conversation with all of you who have joined. Please let us know where you're joining us from. If you have joined on YouTube, let us know where you're watching us from. Let us know what you expect. Let us know if there's any question you already have, because I know today's conversation will be quite powerful. And I'm not saying the other conversations were not, but this one I know has really triggered a lot of positive sentiments with a lot of people. And I've received messages around, some of the conversations that we're going to have around father wounds, mother wounds, healthy relationships, male friendships, and so on and so forth. But stick around. We definitely have a powerful, powerful session set out for everyone who has joined and everyone who will watch later on. And please, please, please subscribe to Stories and Conversations with Rahel. This is on YouTube. Subscribe, share, like, and comment in case anything around this conversation obviously resonates with you. And please have your male friends, your brothers, your uncles, your fathers watch this particular live, because I know this live is going to change someone's life. And I mean, I will not be doing this without the guest that I have for today. And you all know my co-host, Dr. Moses Macharia, who's been with me from the first week. So thank you so much, Dr. Moses, for being part of this, sharing your voice and sharing your expertise around men and mental health on this No Shave November series. So karibu sana. And even as you just reintroduce yourself, because you never know, maybe it's a first time for a lot of people to join us. When you're reintroducing yourself, you can tell us a little bit more around who you are in terms of relationship, right? Are you married? How many children you have? And what you're looking forward to in this particular conversation. And our other guest, I'm really privileged for us to have him here tonight. His name is Felix Mungai. He's a renowned youth mentor and a leader in Deliverance Church. He's also a senior associate within the regulatory compliance and registration area. And he has done quite a lot with his work around the mentorship and also around his career. He's married to one Gladys Mungai, and he's a father to 3 children. So we are really, really happy to have Felix on this conversation or on this call today, on this live, and we cannot wait for him to share some of the insights that he has around men and mental health and relationships. So today we are going to be talking about relationships. And I know when I put out, or when we put out the poster around relationships, people are thinking about romantic relationships, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we want to talk about the whole aspect of relationships. So both on the romantic side and also friendships, because we know these 2 areas are very key for our fellow men. So Dr. Macharia, karibu sana. I don't know if you want to share anything more about yourself, about this area of relationships. Feel free, right? And then we can have Felix come on and introduce himself as well.
Great.
Karibu.
Thank you. Thank you, Rael. My name is Dr. Moses Macharia, and I am a mental health practitioner, particularly in the area of employee wellness and also trauma. And the topic today is quite amazing. As Rael asked, yes, I am married to one wife and I have one son. And I have been in this space of relationship for quite a while, close to a decade now. And it's quite beautiful having this conversation, sharing from a personal space, from my own life, but also giving a professional insight. And I cannot do this, obviously, without Rael, but also the guest that we are having. And so I want to send it over to the other part of the screen and invite Felix. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. It's indeed a great privilege to be part of this podcast this evening. Thanks everyone for joining. Rahel for the invite. I think already the full introduction of myself has been said. I'm passionate about the area of mentorship. And so as we talk about issues of relationships and even maneuvering on this, and not forgetting, of course, yesterday was Men's International, Day. And the theme for 2024, was for, positive role models. And that's where mentorship comes in. So I'm glad to come on board and even for us to have this conversation this evening. Thank you. Looking forward to a great interaction.
Awesome. Karibu sana, Felix. And we couldn't have asked for a better guest. So thank you. And thank you for reminding us that yesterday was International Men's Day. So we salute all the men, all the brothers, all the fathers, anyone with or without a title and is a man. We salute you. We know what you go through, the silent struggles that you have around mental health. So that's why this conversation is really important. So get your mug of chocolate, or just, sit and watch. And please feel free to put in your questions on the chat. If it's a very sensitive question, please feel free to DM me on any of the social media channels. I have my team with me, so they can obviously share with me some of these questions. So let's get right onto the conversation. And Dr. Moses, obviously, you're the one who opens the floor. In Kiswahili tunasemanga, wewe ndo unatufungulia. Inaitwaje floor?
Uwanja.
Yes. Wewe ndio unatufungulia uwanja. For the guys in diaspora, that is French for, he's the one who opens the floor for us. So let me ask him the first question, and then we can get going with the conversation with Felix. So I know, Dr. Moses, we've talked about different mental health challenges. And actually, during the first week, we talked about the general mental health challenges with men. But I would like you to hone in or shed a light or emphasize on some of the challenges that men face that impact romantic relationships. Yes.
Beautiful. So, dear men, karibuni sana, because this is something that you really want to pay a keen ear to. So, as men, we face various myriads of issues and challenges that we have learned for the past 2 weeks that we may face. The first week, we mentioned some of the mental health issues that we may get to experience, from anxiety, trauma, and all this. Today, as we zero in, I think you really would understand how and why you behave the way you do, and actually start a journey of healing and seeking help. And so, to answer you, Rahel, I think some of the things that really impact men in their relationships or in their intimacy, I would zero in, number one, tuanze na, start off from the masculinity ideology that we have as traditional African men, that I'm not able to share my emotions as a man, and therefore there is emotional suppression. I remember last week telling you, men, as long as you provided back in the day, you were a father figure, go to the marketplace and come back home, you were sort of secluded. And so men quickly learned to suppress their emotions. But that actually affects your relationship, because then you're reluctant to be vulnerable to the people who really matter to you, to your partner, to, your family, you're not vulnerable. And so this can lead to, unresolved issues because you tend to sort of avoid conflicts. And I think hapo mbele, as we move forward, we will actually debunk on that. And that also leads to this unresolved trauma. A lot of us men go through lots of traumatic events. Chances are you experience trauma courtesy of how you were brought up. And, your upbringing, maybe it was in a family that was dysfunctional, or a family that, the parents weren't present. So this creates something in you whereby there is an emotional barrier. And so people cannot get through to you. And so you'll find this kind of a man is not able to open up or trust their partner fully. This is an issue that boils into, the relationship. Anxiety. And I know for most of you, you've heard, of attachment styles that come through. And one of them that is key is, anxious attachment. And this comes up from how you were brought up. How were you? How was the conditions in your family? How are they like? And so this particular individual, you'll see traits such as there is excess worry in this particular person. And in terms of conflict, you'll find this person, he's a bit avoidant. There is distrust. There is, overthinking, of course, because obviously he's living in this world. And then there is communication issues. Yes, sometimes the communication issues that you face may be as a result of the anxiety that you're facing in life, or again, as you're being brought up, the condition and how your family was like. Because again, quickly, by now we know that, human beings, we get to model a lot from what we were shown. And as psychologists, we say sometimes a child comes as an empty slate and they are taught things. And so that's some of the things that I get to see. And lastly, I have to touch on this, Rahel, because it's very, very important. And you see it in a lot of men, anger issues. This is a key issue, affecting a lot of men. And so you will see this person, this thing portraying itself like, I'm a bit jealous, I'm a bit, reserved, I'm taking care of you. But sometimes it's just red flags. And you see some jealousy, you see some overdependence. And when this person does not feel that, then they get to express it through getting angry or having an outburst of some emotion that is not really, really good. And so just to mention, I think quickly we can pick this because I have seen this happening in a lot of guys. And I think it would be good just to debunk on this, even as we have this conversation together.
Wow, wow. You just when you're speaking about all those areas, I'm just visualizing all the men in my life, including my family members. So definitely a lot of truth in that. And I mean, Felix, for you, these masculinity ideologies, right, in the African setting, especially, you have to be strong. You cannot show emotion. If you show emotion, then you are labeled as X and X. And we talked about the different labels in one of the sessions that we had, right? I know some of them are called simps, and I don't know if there are other labels, but I know there's a label called simps, especially when men show emotion. So there's this pressure for men, right, as they're growing up. Like even when a boy child falls down as they're growing up, they're told, "Smama, upai kulia," or something like that. That's French for stand up. You should not cry, or you should not show emotion. You're okay, or something like that. So you men are wired to be always, all the time, to be strong and not show emotion. So has this been a challenge for you, especially as you were growing up and as you came to your own and as you became a leader in the spaces that you're in? And how did you navigate through it?
Well, being in Africa and raised as an African man, as you've rightly put it, mostly the pressure is usually to portray this, I'm hard rock, yeah, and most times would be challenged in other instances, even to almost prove that point, yeah, get into fights, just to bring about the point. But definitely, it does not mean that any of us, as men, that we don't have emotions. No, we equally have emotions. We process them differently, perhaps, from how ladies process it. And as rightly also Doc has said, most of these are also mostly guided by how we were raised. So for me, looking back really in terms of, my growing up and all, I was raised by a single mom. So I didn't have a lot of interactions with my father or my dad. And with that being the case, then I had to find my way around how does this whole thing of being a man really works. Yeah. Most times I would have maybe to share with friends who are in the same space as myself, whether peers and those who are slightly older than me, so that I can process this whole thing that I'm trying to go through and be able to understand really what is happening, how should I actually navigate this. And so by having peers or friends who would actually work with me really helped a lot. Not only that, but also having mentors in my life. Because I didn't have a father in my life, it didn't mean that I didn't have a father figure in that case. Yeah. But I know also maybe Doc will talk about this maybe later. But for most men, if you find them in a clique or in a group that are seated together, you'll find it very difficult for most men to even mention the names of their friends. Yeah, we just call each other chairman, mkuu, yeah, governor. We use those titleish, but really the deep connections of getting to know names and other details, we try to somewhat interact superficially. Yeah, and I hope we can, after this conversation, get it deeper. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, even as you grew up and you became a husband and then a father. So, what are the things that you are teaching your son? I'm sure you have a son. What are the things that you're teaching him? Because, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we have been wired, or children have been wired to act in a certain way, especially male children. So, what are you teaching your son? Like maybe one thing that you're teaching your son to make him open up or be more vulnerable or show emotion, and telling him that being emotional is not a weakness. It's just part of who he is. Yeah.
Great. Well, we've had quite a bit of interactions. Of course, it's a roller coaster parenting. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's never one perfect way of doing it. But definitely, I've tried to help them also navigate that journey. So that if you feel sad, then I give him an ear to open up and express himself. So, what is it that really is making you sad? Um, and try to explain to him really this is part of life. Yeah, it's okay to cry. Yeah, but again, don't dwell there. Yeah, but at the end of the day, open up, share what is it that is bothering you. And the amazing thing is, yes, I have two sons, and especially for our firstborn, he's very sensitive, and so it's very easy to read him. When he's not happy, you'll just see it on his face. You don't need someone to tell you that this guy is not okay. Yeah, so they are very actually expressive on that. Yes.
Yeah. And thank you for being an example. So I can
Thank you.
see, yeah, I can see, Mungai, you've talked about, what are you saying? Where ni kuchungu? I don't know what that is about, but please let me know so that in case there's a question you have, we can have Dr. Moses or Felix answer. And thanks for joining us. For the ones who have just joined, we have just started this conversation around men and mental health, and we are honing in on romantic relationships and male friendships. So, Dr. Macharia, um,
Yep.
we talked about past trauma also in the last conversation. So, father wounds and mother wounds, right? And we don't talk about this enough because some of the things that you mentioned earlier, so the avoidant attachment, communication issues, anger issues, most of them stem from past trauma. So, how do these traumas or these childhood wounds play a role in shaping men's approach to love and intimacy?
Well, men's approach to love and intimacy I would say this, for around, the bigger chunk of men, 85%, let's say, it's out of what was modeled and what they saw. That's what they're going to keep on doing. For those who didn't have a chance, they might have a rough time, getting through. And some of them, would go through vigorous therapy and support just to get to rediscover themselves. For men, one of the biggest things that gets to affect us, especially when we hit teenage, would be the identity, trying to find out, who am I? Who am I meant to be? That's a very big bucket. And sometimes we tend to piggyback that to, our parents or our father figure. And so what happens if your father is not there, or you are raised by a narcissistic mother? Some of the things that I can tell you that I get to see from men who, have particular wounds, let's say mother wounds or father wounds, is things like lack of boundaries. This particular individual does not know how to say no. And so that's something you'll always quickly see. This is a person who will always try to overplease everyone who's around them, simply because, they had to work hard to try and win a parent's love. Can I get a bit controversial here? Are you a workaholic watching this today? Would it be by the fact that you are not finding the necessary support where you felt you were not needed? You quickly learned that you needed to overwork, you needed to compensate so that you feel needed. And so sometimes there is this separation that comes and you feel you're not wanted. And for, mother wounds or father wounds, sometimes they create that barrier where you feel you are really not wanted. And so you have to create something to feel needed. These are the people who would overwork in school and try and get good grades so that they would get an affirmation from their father. These are the kind of people who would try and put themselves out there and really want someone to say, unakaa fiti leo. And it happens even today. And so these are some of the things that, get to happen when you're going through such things, especially through trauma. Trust and vulnerability. You can never fully open up to your partner or people who really, really care about you. And so this is something we quickly see, especially with people who are experiencing father wounds. They may, struggle to trust people because this particular individual maybe used to show up and then check out. Authority figures are not as significant as they used to because there is one person who undid for everyone else. And so sometimes they get even in the wrong side of the law because, there wasn't that support that they were getting pretty much from this authoritative figure. And some other people like uncles had to step in. But I'm sad to say that there is a particular role that you as a man can play, especially in your child's life, that nobody else can play. There is a particular role that you can play as a mom that nobody else can do. Now, hypothetically speaking, you had a narcissistic mother, and you have these mother wounds, and you have boundary issues, you have issues of trust, your attachment style is avoidant because even when your partner is raising an issue with you, you quickly shun away from having that conversation with them. You sweep things under the rug or say, can we address this at a later time? Those are hints of, past trauma. But what ends up happening for you as a guy, still hypothetically speaking, is you might end up marrying someone just like your mother who will be demanding just like your mother. And so quickly, Rahel, here you can see that sometimes these things play out both in our childhood and in our adulthood. And we are caught up in this world that we cannot break free from. And we need someone to be there. We need a therapist who can be there and help us navigate, can help us pick some of these things that we do unconsciously because they are so ingrained in us and how we respond to particular things, even at work. I know last week we were talking about work and careers and for guys in the entrepreneurship space, you got a front row seat. But even how you respond might be as a result, how you respond to traumas and issues at work might come as a response from what has been happening from the home space, the traumas that you have been exposed to. And so these are some of the things that, you get to see these people struggling with. And lastly, conflict resolution. They will always fight, but resolving things is going to be a hurdle. All right. Wacha nieke kikomo hapo. Let me put a full stop there.
Oh my gosh. No, I want you to go on because I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah. These ones I'm sure are hitting home. And maybe one thing, Dr. Macharia, which I've seen, men who like rescuing women, what do you attribute that to? Because there's a lot of that goes on, right? And also love bombing. But talk about men who like rescuing women. Is there traumatic incidents connected to that? And can you talk about it a little bit more?
Let me talk about it. In my world, I called it Messiah mentality. And this is something that affects men. I have seen it affecting more men than women. So clearly, this is something, dudes, fellas, we have to talk about it. Of course, this stems out, particularly, you'll see a father figure who was either toxic, abusive. And this particular young boy who couldn't even defend himself, desiring to save the mother from the agony. Maybe the man might not be even bad. He might be just simply abusive, has multiple women here and there and does not treat the mother right. This might stem from that as well. And so quickly you find this particular individual who wants to save everybody in the world. Clearly, gentlemen, we cannot save everybody else in the world. I mean, you can do if you're willing to go to the cross again and get, crucified. If you are willing to do that, please talk to us. Easter is coming. We need someone as a prop. But from such incidences, we see men quickly modeling themselves to be saviors. And so if they find a girl who, is struggling financially, he will be there presently to say, I'm going to help you up. I'm going to give, I'm going to take care of this particular issue for you so that you are okay. Feeding to his personal ego, not being an assistant and helping this person genuinely. It's actually to feed his ego so that they are able to be told, oh, thank you. Oh, you are the best. And to create, you remember that what I was saying about workaholism? It's the same thing here. They're just trying to create a need for them to feel wanted simply because before they didn't feel wanted. They felt abandoned. They felt rejected. And so they have to create a space where they can feed off that so that they can feel better as a person. So this is a deep-seated issue, more than just trying to save someone, more than trying to bail a friend out, more than trying to, be there for a parent. That black tax that we experience as African, it cuts across. My Ugandan brothers, how are you? Yeah. I wanted to say to others, Chamuge, but it's fine. Yeah. It's an issue that cuts across the African black tax, and it creates a need. And sometimes even parents might use this and say, nobody else can take care of me, because they've known, because they identified you as the child who would always stand up or wanted to stand up for that parent. So it goes beyond a relationship with a significant other, a partner, a girl. It might be your mother, it might be your auntie who uses the same tactics to manipulate you, or this particular guy creating this world, as we said, to feel needed. That's what they want, and they want to feed off that to boost up their egos.
Dr. Moses, umekuja sana, but I really love that, because I've seen a lot of men fall into that trap, including my brothers, my cousins. I've seen them fall into that trap of, and then they're called mama's boys, right? Mama's boys, yeah? And I know, Felix, you resonate so well with this particular part of this conversation, because you were raised by a single mom. Your dad was not there. So, I mean, what can you share about your story, about your experiences that, shape up to who you become, and hopefully someone that you are going to teach your son not to be as he continues growing up?
Great. It's amazing hearing it from Daktari, and I'm seeing myself as it's like a mirror reflection, what he shared about, which really fills in a lot of gaps, in terms of, for me growing up, seeing the patterns and what I've been able to do. And I'm like, oh, was that where the inspiration came from? But it's really great, and I like the truths in it. One is, while growing up, and of course having that absentee father, one of the decisions I made, a resolve that I made at a personal level, is that I would be all that, that I missed in my dad to my children. Yeah. I said I would be the best father that I can ever be to my children. And so anytime my children have, these key moments in their lives, whether in school or in church, any social activities as they were, I want to be there no matter what it would cost. Yeah, if it means me to be, out of work for me to actually be present at that point in time, then let it be so. Yeah. So as Dr. has already mentioned, those things really get so much into your nerves without knowing it. You put so much effort to prove a point, but also at the same time to try to live a totally, completely different experience from what that we experienced while growing up. Whereas also Dr. Macharia has mentioned that these affects intimate relationships. I think I also dare say that it also affects spiritual relationships, because if you don't know how to relate with an earthly father, how would you relate with our heavenly father? Because the image and the experience of what you've had as a father, when Christ is saying, you as evil men, when your child asks for bread, you cannot give them a stone. Imagine a father who is that evil. Yeah. If that's the experience you've had, and here you are being told of this God who is our father and he loves us all, it would be very difficult to relate with that message. Yeah. However, I like this particular scripture. Maybe I can quote it. Psalms chapter 68, from verse 5. That scripture says that our heavenly Father is the father to the fatherless. Maybe I can just read it. It says, a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. Yeah. However, I like verse 6, and that's where I'll close it at, that God sets the lonely in families. And I'll pause it there. Yeah. That as much as, in God trying to create a perfect world, in the setup of what a family is, the inefficiencies and the issues that are there in the world that leads to such situations, it does not mean that all hope is lost. No, each of us has been placed, like that scripture says in verse 6, that God sets the lonely in families. Yes, we might miss that father figure, but it does not mean we've lost it all. God has placed us in families. He has placed us, in a society, in a community of people where, those father figures would come into play to actually play the role of role models, to stand up and, stand in that place of being father figures. Yeah. So all hope is not lost. And I want to believe that for any man who is, joining this podcast this evening, if you're not a part of a society somewhere, then you're missing it. Because if we miss the aspect of fatherhood in this case, then God has provided us an alternative, that we can still be raised by other fathers, that in the families that he has already placed us in.
Wow, I really love that. This is our dose of, Sunday sermon. So thank you, Felix, for sharing that. And we're actually getting to the part where we talk about friendships. And I know male friendships are very rare, and you've talked about it. I don't know if it was Dr. Macharia or Felix who talked about, as men, the way you refer to each other, the way you give each other titles, governor, bazoo, huyu sijui ndio yule, or something like that, ndovu niku, and all these titles and all that, just to, you know, rub people's egos or to make people feel good about themselves. And yet deep inside, there is a wound, or there's a trauma, or there's something going on that needs to be addressed. And just before I ask the next question, thank you everyone for joining, the ones who've joined on YouTube, the ones who've joined on Zoom. Thank you for joining. We are having this conversation around men and mental health and relationships, both romantic relationships and male friendships. So, Dr. Moses, I mean, we've talked, and Felix has rightfully put it about community, being part of a community. But one of the things that I remember both you and Dr. Nelson shared in the first session is around isolation, right? And most of this is because of lack of deep, meaningful friendships. Especially with men. Women know how to come together. Women, we are in chamas, we are in all these groups, and we know how to support each other, especially when it comes to personal struggles and other issues. So how can men cultivate solid friendships so that they can talk about their personal struggles, especially around this area of mental health?
Beautiful. Actually, did you know that loneliness is actually a global pandemic? So as much as we talk about, if you remember when Nelson was sharing, that fifth was anchoring the four, isolation and loneliness, that's an issue that we need to address. Now, allow me to talk to you as an African man to another and say, as African men, we live in groups. We find our strength in the masses that we move with. In the traditional setup, when men and women were moving from one community to another, they would move together and particular strong men would be put. Those who are married early, you know, just recently having a new wife would be put at the back. But the strong men would be put up on Bele and walk together and lead the family and lead the community. What is happening to us right now, it's this thing we are calling westernization that has come and taken us by storm, that we no longer have the authenticity of who we are as Africans. We were strong when we would sit together around. And allow me to use this example. When these men would sit to discuss matters pertinent in that particular community, they would sit around, you know, a pot of something that, you know, would make their minds go berserk later on. But these particular men would sit around there. Oh, by the way, let me digress a bit. Also, in that particular place, you know, the door was manned by the elderly man, and the one who was newly married would be put somewhere special so that in case trouble broke, he would be safe and he would continue, you know, with the community and the clan. But these men would sit around together and find strength from each other. What is happening today is whatever Felix is saying, it's so true that we end up calling ourselves governors and bazoo, kiongozi, you know, feeding into people's egos. We are not authentic. Men are struggling with authenticity, whereby they can't be vulnerable. I can't be vulnerable to my friends and tell them, hey guys, I am struggling. I need men. The book of James talks about, you know, confess your sins one to another. How can I confess my sins if I cannot be vulnerable as a man? How can I confess my sins if I cannot go to another brother and say, hey man, I'm struggling with this. I am struggling with finance. And probably you're not even looking for support, because we become so plastic that when we share our issues, we are looking for solutions from this person, because in our minds, we have created this facade that this person can handle our issue. But probably the issue you're struggling with is actually a finance issue in terms of budgeting, in terms of, you know, you're not able to live within your means. And maybe you're being pressured by social media and these other things. And therefore, you need people who can walk with you and tell you, my brother, this is how you budget. This is how you save. This is how you actually help yourself, just for the sake of a rainy day. Or probably you're struggling with other issues. You know, you're struggling with a particular sin that has quickly entangled you and you can no longer come out of it. Men need to get to a place where we can be vulnerable, where we can expose our lives and lead authentic lives. The element of community is the essence of a society. Imagine with me this, if we had a messed up community or a messed up mtaa, mtaa is, I don't know how to put it. Mtaa is like a community where you're living at. It's a messed up place. We would, and led by messed up men, would have a messed up community, and it goes up and it goes up and it goes up. And that's how we have even a messed up nation, where no longer men, we stand up for what is right, but we stand up for what is right by me and my family and my stomach. Men are not leading authentic lives. And therefore, the impact of society, I would say, it's great, but we need to get back to that original design of community. And the original design of community is you pick friends, get 2-3 people who you can be vulnerable with. And you can never have, a community of many. Also, when you have many, you would get lost. You cannot be the real you. These guys might end up hindering who you really are. And so you start mimicking. Today, this is my behavior. Tomorrow, this is my behavior. But you need people, 2, 3, 4 people who you can be authentic. Even Jesus himself, as much as he had the 12, he had the core, the kitchen cabinet that he would run things through. And these people would know much about him. Now, wengine wakabrag, they could chest stamp and say, I'm the beloved. He had his own. Who are your kitchen cabinets? Or do you think everyone is your friends? You see, Rael, the problem we are facing today in the wake of social media is we are surrounded by so many people, yet we stand alone. We are surrounded by so many people that we think that are our friends, and we think we can do life online on a gadget. But real life is done on one-on-one. Real life is done in that tangible connection. Human beings are highly social. You need people around you so that you're able to grow and become a better version of yourself. So the essence of community is important. And as men today, in this November, even as we were being celebrated, how we got celebrated, but we weren't really celebrated. We'll have that conversation another day. Even then, we really need to say, this is our new restart, that we shall foster relationships. We shall build community, authentic communities where we can be ourselves and return back to who God created us to be.
Oh, Dr. Moses, today you have this fire in you, and I love it. I really love it. Guys, if you have any questions, please DM me. Please put it on the chat on YouTube or here on Zoom. We really want to have these conversations more openly. And I see, and I mean, Dr. Moses, you're talking about social media, and I really resonate with you with what you've said. People are using social media as their therapy tools, right? You go on social media and you see 5 ways to motivate yourself or something like that. And I mean, I'm not saying that that content might not be okay, but I think what you're sharing about being part of a community. And one thing that I learned even as I was doing research on this particular topic around men and mental health is that African men actually commit suicide more than any other continent in the world. And it's because of these issues that we're talking about. So, gentlemen, let's talk about these things. I know, yes, we have been cultured not to speak. We have been cultured to be stoic and, macho men and all that. But speaking about it will actually solve something. And I think there's a verse around that, right? No, confessing your sins. And then there's this part where I think it's a statement that says when you share a problem, it's half solved. So let's talk to each other. Let's talk to each other. And I'm not saying talk to me. I'm a woman. I know probably I might not understand. And you guys normally say women are more emotional than you guys. So talk to your men. Get the right kind of men around you. And one thing that I have been really trying to figure out, Dr. Moses and Felix, that I have not, is how men just, choose their friends. For us women, we go with intuition, and our intuitions are very high. So Felix, maybe you can tell us, how do you choose friends? When do you realize that this is the time that I need to reach out to this man? And have you gotten that support that you need from men? Or most of the time you end up going to, other people that are not necessarily your male friends because you do not want that judgment. Because men don't like being judged, especially by their fellow men. And then there's also this aspect for competition and pride and ego, right? So you don't want your fellow man or fellow men to know that there's something going on with me, so that they don't look at me as someone who's insufficient or has a deficiency. So Felix, maybe you can share with us your experience and how it has been for you, and maybe a piece of advice around this particular area.
Well, okay. Thank you. One, for me, when it comes to choosing friends, it's for me, values are very critical for me. That most of the friends that I hang around or hang out with are people that we share the same values. Yeah. Not only that, but we also share the same faith. And faith can come in many aspects. And it's not just, our belief, spiritually, but even just on life issues. Yeah. And I would give a case in example. There are those who believe that women should, their place should be the kitchen, and they should not rise from there. You see, at that point, then our faith then conflicts. Yeah. What do they believe in terms of what is expected of women? But also shared interests. So those are the three things: the shared values, shared faith, shared interests. Because you know how men operate, how men connect very easily, and mostly it is in the areas of vehicles. Yeah, it can be in the area of sports. It can be in the area of investments. Whatever topic it is that becomes a uniting factor, that shared interest becomes a spark point for us to be able to actually have meaningful interactions. Why? Because even in the midst of our conversation, as much as this is the main key area of interest, there are these other life issues that will just come and flow and fall into place at some point. So what really motivates me to reach out? One, not just for the health or the well-being of the others, but even for myself. Yeah. One of the critical things that I've done is I've taken it very seriously upon myself that whenever I have a particular challenge, whether it's on finances, on life issues, on marriage, I have mentors that I actually talk to. Mentors are people who are steps ahead of you. They have gone this journey, they know the way, they have gone through these challenges. And one of the inspirations that we get from them, is just someone to hear someone's voice telling you, you'll make it through this. I believe in you. Yeah. So that's what mentors do. And for me, really looking at my life and where I am today, I really owe it to the gentlemen that God brought my way, the mentors, the models that walked through together with me in life, not only in my young age of growing up, but even to this day, to date, in my age, I also still have a mentor. And we always, regularly have meetings and we have checkpoints. We had this conversation last time on this. Where are you? How are you doing? You know? So that really helps. So mentors. And then number two, peers. I think I've already shared the 3 points, that really help in terms of choosing friends. Yeah, but why do I reach out to these peers? Because we face similar challenges. And perhaps, when you talk to a mentor, they may the aspect of language, because of age difference and what have you, experiences and all that, they might not relate totally because you might be in different circumstances. Perhaps they went through the same challenges, but in a different timeline. Yeah, so they navigated their way around based on the conditions as they were then. But you see, when you now talk to peers, they speak your language. They relate with the things that you're struggling with. They relate with those struggles, and so we're able to share with one another and challenge each other as peers on, yes, this is the issue. So how do we navigate around this topic? How then do we walk around it? There are particular cases in which, very intentionally, we've had sit downs. Yeah. And most times for men, we may not really do sleepovers, but call men for a meet, Mbuzi Choma or something. I can assure you, no one would turn down that kind of an offer. Yeah. So at times it would be in those areas that, it's fun. Maybe it's sports. There is some game that is going on tonight. Can we go and watch? As much as we might be supporting I mean, the teams, different teams that are playing that night, we'll put aside those differences and watch.
Felix, you're breaking a bit. I think your internet.
Will sort of go, but at the end, long way in just forming. Yeah. So what motivates me to reach out to my peers, to my colleagues? Like, Doc has mentioned, one of the things that comes in when it comes to mental health is that solitude, some loneliness. It's very easy to observe. For me, I stay around people and interact with people a lot, and it's very easy for me to notice change in patterns. That yes, this guy would show up for meetups and all that, and if they miss one or two, then I start getting some red flags. Yeah, and at that point, then I'm obligated to actually reach out and ask, hey, what's up? What's happening? What's going on? How can we help? What is it? How can we navigate around it? And so I hope that even for all of us as we listen to this podcast this evening, that would seek to have, that deep connection, to the extent that when you miss out of place, then it is your friends that will come to look out for you, because they'll say, we know this guy, this is not how, they usually are. And perhaps that's how we would be able to be rescued. At times we die with things. We say, ni kukufa kimwanaume. Yeah. But in actual sense, if you actually just talked to someone, they would have helped you through, they would have held your hand and walked you through. It looked so difficult. But, as Rahel has said, when a problem is shared, it's halved. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that. And Felix, just in a few minutes before I ask the question that's on the chat, what would you say about peer pressure? Because there is peer pressure, and I've realized peer pressure is across all age groups. It doesn't matter whether you're 20, 30,
Yeah.
40. I think at some point, I think in the 30s, men want to be in, the latest sports car or, all this pressure
Yeah.
that you guys give yourselves or married, like you should be
Mhm.
married at a certain age. And even the younger ones, the 20-year-olds, everyone is smoking weed. So let's go and smoke weed. Like, there's no problem. I'm young. I'm going to recover or something like that. But most of the time, there are consequences to it. So what would you say about peer pressure and choosing the right friends? I know you've said about shared values, shared vision, and all those things, but sometimes, especially the young ones, do not know even what vision is all about. And all these things get cultivated with time and with experience. So, what would you say about peer pressure, especially across the age group, starting with the younger ones going up? And Dr. Moses, you can also share anything around that.
Okay. Well, I used to think that peer pressure is just something that affects teenagers or adolescents. But of course, having grown up and gone way past that age, I've come to realize that peer pressure cuts across board. So there is no one who is immune to peer pressure. At times we feel intimidated by the successes of our peers. And for that reason, then we start looking down on ourselves because it looks like the others are doing well or better than yourself. Yeah. And that's where, the mentors come into play, because they bring you back to track. That yes, that's someone else's journey. Focus on your journey, focus on yourself, focus on your transformation. Yeah, because that's the most critical. And of course, unfortunately, given our social media culture as it is now, the pressure most times is to prove that I'm there. There is this tendency to focus on material things, like you've already shared, this car, this, for where I come from, we talk about land and ownerships of lands and pieces of land, scattered across. Yeah. So there are those tendencies to feel insufficient or having not attained simply because there is no material attached to that expression. Yeah. So we don't have to tie our success, we don't have to tie our being to those materials. Yeah. And that's where we lose it. The moment you disconnect, we disconnect ourselves from that push to try to prove that we belong, to prove that we have it. Yeah. Then the issue of peer pressure will not appear at any point in time. Because one, you have a mentor to remind you, hey, this is your journey, that is someone else's journey. So don't pressure yourself to be like someone else. Your journey, path, and all this is different from each other. Yeah. But also number two, settling to the reality that not all of us, everything will work out at the same time, the same way, simply because we went to the same school and did the same course, or even perhaps stay in the same neighborhood. Yeah. So each of us have different paths in life, and whichever turn it takes, the most critical is remind yourself that you have a journey ahead of you that is specific to you and not equivalent or equal to that of your neighbor or your friend.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's also an element of identity. Dr. Macharia, any additional thoughts on that particular topic?
Actually, I think Felix puts it pretty well. For me, I would just say, the greatest prison people live in is fear of what other people may, think. I call it a prison. And so I would prefer you do what he said. And I think what he's also sharing is echoing, if you remember when I was talking and preaching about the 4 people. I think there is a question down there, or someone saying, reminding us about the 4 people who sent this guy down. And he was asking about his friends. But the 4 people, the mentor, the coach, the therapist, the peer, these are very key people to bring into your circle. And so, yeah, peer pressure is just simply that, pressure. It's just simply pressure that you can keep away from, which is not necessary. You don't really have to get into that debt this Christmas. You really don't have to. You really have nothing to prove to anyone. Do you, be authentic.
Yeah, but I mean, I want to just dwell here just for like a minute, but there's the element of enjoying your life, because we need to enjoy our lives, but there's also a very thin line between enjoying our lives, or men enjoying their lives, and also, what is it called? Like having catastrophic effects through that enjoyment. So what's that? How do you know that you're crossing on this other side? Because I mean, we cannot live in a box and say, this is the way life is going to be. We need to enjoy our lives. We need to have a very perfect or good balance, not perfect, good balance. So how can a man tell that they are getting to this other side? Because there's this thin line between enjoying and then the catastrophic effects. Dr. Moses.
In the famous words of, I don't know who, I'll call him Mapangala, vunja meno kama vunja mifupa kama meno iko. Yes, I don't know what that means, but to my other friends, my neighbors and friends, it just basically means enjoy life. The youngings call it, you only live once. But is it at the expense of your family? Is it at the expense of you losing yourself because you're trying to fit in? You see, you'd rather be in a different crowd rather than going with the wrong crowd. You'd rather be in a different space and even be alone and be the best version of yourself. And so it's a very thin line. I would say enjoy yourself, but enjoy it wisely. So for example, in terms of finances, financial gurus will tell you, have you created a budget? Do you have a budget? For example, we are getting into the festivities, which I'm very big on. I love festivities. I love decorating. I love going all out. But is there a budget for that? or will you be dented? I mean, kids are going back to school come January, no matter the kind of system you're doing. Are you ready for that? As a man, does it mean that I go and overspend or overdrink at a particular joint just to make my friends feel great? In fact, it's so interesting to know that, the influence that your friends, your peers have, when you select them right, they actually have an impact on your choices. They influence your choices. And so I will always encourage men, and this is what I try to always do, that always do an audit of your circle, do an audit of your circle. And so when do you know when you're drifting away? When you start losing yourself, when you're no longer in that straight and narrow path of your values. Because Felix has actually mentioned, even when selecting friends, the value element is key. So who are you as a man? And I think the biggest question today would be, who are you? Who do you want to hang out with, and who genuinely are you? For me, that's the key question I'd ask. And so when you answer those questions, your values, your strengths, your boundaries, your confinements, then I think that would actually address, and you'll actually know when you're drifting apart.
Yeah, I really love that. And I know time is far gone. So let me just read through that question, and I'll throw this to Felix. So John says, as the doctor speaks, it reminds me about the 4 young men who took their friend to Jesus for healing. And this begs the question, do I have 4 real friends? Wow, that's a question to ponder on. And I'll also think about it myself. Because I think Felix mentioned, when you have these friends around you and maybe you go quiet for a day or 2 or a week or something like that, who checks up on you? Because most of the time we go through all these issues, and sometimes we don't want anyone to come into our space because we are thinking. And men, I know you do this a lot. So who are these friends who check up on you just to, say like, okay, let me check up on Felix. Let me see whether he's okay. If he's okay, that's okay. Right. And we don't have those real friendships right now. I think right now we are so fickle in terms of friendships. They are very surface level. So think about it. I think this is a question to ponder on for everyone, including the men. And then he asked, should I have only Christian friends in my circle? So, Felix, I want you to answer that. Should I only have Christian friends in my circle? And I think this is for men and even for us women. But yeah, you can tell us, should men only have Christian friends in their circle?
Definitely no. I have friends across the board in different beliefs. And that's why when I mentioned that one of when you're looking at the criteria of who your friend should be is on area of belief, I said it's not only in the area of spiritual belief. It's not just in the area of whether Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or atheist. No. It's basically the belief systems that guide this person's life. Yeah. There are those who believe, like Dr. has mentioned, the new generation, it's YOLO. You only live once. Why think about tomorrow? Why think about the generations after you? Why think about your children? Yeah, that's a belief system. Yeah, for others, like the example I gave, there are those who believe that, we should live in the traditional age where women should just be stay at home. They should not take a profession. They should not. So when we talk about beliefs and belief systems, it's not just the aspect of religion and what we believe in, but also on all the other areas of life. Is it a shared belief? If it is not, then you'll find it will be very difficult for you to work together. Yeah, there is this scripture that says that two cannot walk together unless they agree. Yeah, if you put a yoke, on a bull and or an oxen, and you go out farming, anywhere that the left bull or the one that is on the right would go, the other one has no option. It can only go in that direction. And so that's why we are saying be very careful with the kind of friends that you have around you and the belief that they have, because they'll pull you into that belief system of theirs. And so if it is destructive, as Dr. has already mentioned, and to you, because you'll be led astray.
Yeah, I love that. I love that answer. And I hope that answers your question, John. Then Dr. Macharia, let me ask you this. There's someone who has asked, as a man, how do you effectively handle peer pressure that is directed to you from a friend or spouse who seems to get the negative pressure from more mature or elderly people around her or him in the name of mentors or good elderly friends? Let me repeat that. I don't know why I'm struggling, but let me repeat. As a man, how do you effectively handle peer pressure that is directed to you from a friend or spouse who seems to get the negative pressure from more mature or elderly people around her or him in the name of mentors or good elderly friends?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. But one thing that stands out, as you mentioned, that is boundaries, and I'll come to that. But I would like for men to know that it takes actually courage to grow up and become who you really are. And by part of you growing to be who you really are as a man, something that we were never conditioned as African men is something called boundaries. And by boundaries, I mean that word no. And it's actually a complete word. And so this negative pressure that might come from, elderly people who might be purporting to be mentors, I want you to quickly remember something that already Felix has told us, that we all are in our journeys, and how God has ordained us and made us is we live out a particular journey that's individual to us. It's our journey. And therefore, a friend might have cleared with you campus, 15 years ago and made such much stride when you have made less. That should make you not feel less than of a person. And for people who struggle again with trauma, by the men, let me pause and say, if you're struggling with trauma, you need help. You need help. Today, I'm going to call you out. I've been dishing this truth because it's time. It's time to prioritize your mental health. It's time to prioritize who you are meant to be. And so coming back, these things may come as pressure, but remember that your journeys are different. Remember that what God has called you for, it's different from mine or another individual, another fella who's in your circle. And so this negative pressure, one of the ways that you can mitigate it is by boundaries. And it happens mostly for people who, have been struggling with people pleasing, because if your spouse has been, a people pleaser and she's living her life for others and not herself, then she might be caught up in this loop. You need to quickly understand, especially as partners and as married couple, or someone who you're dating, that you're pulling in weight to the same direction. And therefore, what am I communicating here? She needs to understand that this is a journey and this process might take time. Sometimes you need to be called out as a man. Sometimes it takes other men to call out the greatness in you. It might sound negative, but there are people who see a potential in you and are able to call that out. But great mentors not only call that out, they actually lead the way. They actually live out to be a model and tell you, this is how you go about this. These are some of the opportunities. They stand as gatekeepers and open for you particular doors that you can, dash in and make the impact that you're supposed to make and live out your call. But if it's a pressure of, they are driving X car, and why are we driving this particular kind of car? We need to up our game. We need to, no. In that place, put a hard stop. Put your foot down as a man and say no. It's a complete answer.
I love that. No is a complete answer. It's a statement. It's a full statement. I love that. And anyone who's joined the call or the live on YouTube, if you have any further questions, I know Dr. Macharia and Felix will leave their contact details. Please reach out to them. one thing that I normally say when we have these conversations, this is not just, a Wednesday evening where we just sit and have conversations and there's nothing that follows that. This is continuous, and we want men to get that help even after this conversation. So reach out to Dr. Moses, reach out to Felix if you need their support. So as we come to a close, because time has really gone, Felix, if you can share with us any parting shot, and as you share your parting shot, share with us how can men start cultivating meaningful relationships, especially for younger gentlemen, because I know that's where a lot of the men, go astray and they don't understand their purpose yet. They're still experiencing all these things in life. So how can you advise them to start cultivating healthier, mature, meaningful, purposeful relationships?
Wow, that's quite a loaded question. It is. Maybe I can share from my experience. I mostly serve among young people. And I remember this one time after we had church and it was over, people were around and sharing. And then I saw these young people who had sat together in a circle. But now each of them was on their device. Yeah. So I went out and reached out to them and said, hey, are you guys hanging out? Could you be chatting? One is sending the message to the other and the other one is replying and liking, sharing memes and all. So there's, unfortunately, in our current day, we may lose it, with the fisio of, view of social media. You chat and connect with someone and you think that you've connected so much, so deeply, but there's a lot of faked online. Yeah. And so it's not something that you can actually trust. So one of the things I did is I approached these young men and told them, hey, can't you just have a conversation, interact with each other, put the device on the side for a moment. Yeah. So I believe it starts there, that the place to be authentic is that I can look into your eye and tell you this difficult, hard truth from the bottom of my heart, and would still be friends and we talk tomorrow. You'll not block me, you know? That's how authentic relationships are grown. It's not in the sweet nothings, the fun, the going out and all. No, it is when rubber meets the road. I've done something in my life that does not align or does not agree with what, the values that we share as a team or as friends. You come and tell me, hey, my guy, on this one, I've supported you in many things, but on this one, no, this one, you're wrong. Yeah. So we should be ready to embrace that criticism. Yeah. The wise man says that open rebuke is better than hidden love. When someone loves you secretly and yet they can see you walking to your destruction and they don't say anything about it, they don't scream about it. Then that love does not benefit me in any way. But if you can gather yourself up and have the confidence to come and challenge me on a decision or on something that I've done that does not align, with our shared values, then that is where true, authentic relationships actually arise from.
I love that. So people, please put your devices down. Let's start having meaningful conversations. And I hope, Felix, for yourself and even with, the men that are around you, can actually start having or bringing together these men in a community setting or whatever kind of setting, like what you talked about, Nyama Chomas and all that, and have these conversations openly. Because women, we do it so well, but men, I know there's a struggle there. So if you need our support, we will be there to support in planning. Then you guys can have that conversation. But thank you so much for sharing that. And Dr. Macharia, you can also share with us a parting shot. And we're talking about romantic relationships. So how can spouses, partners, girlfriends, people who are courting, how can they support their men or the men in their lives much better, so that they are open with their, vulnerabilities, with their childhood traumas and some of the things that they fear? Because we all have fears, and sometimes those things get resolved much later on in life when we learn certain things. But how can we, as women, and as spouses and partners, any title that we have, support the men in our lives much better so that they're more vulnerable, especially for the sake of emotional intimacy?
Beautiful. That's amazing. For friends, partners, spouses, I think one way that you can support is, number one, create an environment of peace. As simple as that. Create an environment of peace where this particular fella would come in and feel peace and not, another attack. Men battle a lot out there. And when they come home, they just want an amazing experience where they feel this is home, this is safety. A home is not just this thing called a building. It's actually the people therein. And if you are a partner, if you're a spouse today and you're listening to this, would you create that environment? Would you be someone's home? Would you be your partner's home? Number two, I know this will sound spiritual, but I am born again. So I'll say this, and it's pray. Pray for your partner. Pray for your partner. There are a couple of things that I'm learning quickly, even working with couples through, premarital counseling, that there is a lot of battles that men are facing that maybe even be beyond. There might be like a principality, in their home that has been trying to, weigh them down. If you remember, if you're a believer and you remember, in the Bible, we have like two accounts that I can think of top of mind where male kids are actually killed. There is a power that a man carries. Dear man, there is a power that you carry. There is a particular anointing that you carry. And therefore, it's for you to try and bring that out. And I pray that through the Holy Spirit that you will be able to tap into that and bring that out. And so, number two, ladies, what did we say? Yes, pray for your partner. That's what you need to do. Number three, seek out therapy. For fellas, this is for you. I know for us men, we don't like going for therapy. We say that thing is for the ladies. But guys, even a wounded soldier goes to that infirmary to get treatment. My suggestion to you is, it's okay to start over and write a new story. It's actually okay to start over and write a new story. So would you desire that today is that day of reckoning, that day of redemption, that you'll say, I'm going to try this out. I've gotten a couple of men who have come for therapy and said, I'm here, I'm trying this thing out. I really don't know what it entails. And the journey is totally pivot to something beautiful where they advocate for it. And so if you've experienced a traumatic experience, you have mother wounds, you have father wounds. You know how men, we don't know how to say our problems and issues. We say, you're feeling sad, but you call it stress. You're having a financial issue, you call it stress. You have an anger issue, you call it stress, because that's the only mental health issue that you know. Please seek out support. And so, ladies, would you support us even as we do this? For some of you today, it might be going to that spouse and saying, or to that partner and saying, can we do therapy together? I've realized that I have my own toxicity, but there are a couple of things that I would desire for you to also work through. And God's going to help you through that. So I've given you three things. I'm not going to give you a lot of things, just three things. And that it's okay to start all over again. Remember, strong men are simply not born. They are made out of the experiences that you've gone through. That's what makes strong men. And would you be a strong man to that brother? Would you be a strong man to that young boy if you're a father who's looking up to you? And just like Felix say, I'm going to be everything that I never experienced. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better. And give them that gift of presence. Thank you.
Wow. Really, really, really amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Macharia, for sharing what you've just shared. And I know this is resonating with a lot of men. And I pray that this conversation will start opening up even more and more conversations in your own settings, with your friends, with your church mates, with your workmates and people around you. So remember, this will be on YouTube. So please share with your friends, share with the male, what do I call them? Not the male people, the gentlemen. Let me call them gentlemen. The gentlemen around you, please share with them, because this conversation definitely, I know, will do something positive in people's lives. So I want to say again, thank you to Felix and Dr. Macharia. And before we finally end this conversation, because we've been ending it for a while now, Felix, if someone wants to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you? Maybe you can share some of the, either social media or email or number, whichever you prefer, and Dr. Macharia as well, especially around mental health, therapy, seeking therapy around mental health. Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks for the opportunity once again, Rahel. I appreciate. In case anyone wants to reach out, they can reach me on email. It's just by name, Mungai Felix @gmail.com. mungaifelix@gmail.com. However, you can also reach me on my handles, still the same, Mungai Felix K. So that's my handle both on Twitter. It's the same also on Instagram, even on Facebook. Yes, on Facebook, just my name, Felix Mungai. Yeah, otherwise it was great to have this conversation. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Moses, Dr. Macharia.
Beautiful. You can reach me physically at NTM Sidai Wellness Center. That's where I sit in as one of the therapists. And so I invite you to have this conversation with us. But if you desire a referral to a different therapist, I would be more than glad to also do that. You can reach me on my number 0727 800 280. For the ones in diaspora, +254 727 800 280. And on socials, at Moses Macharia on Facebook, at Moses Macharia on LinkedIn, and at Dr. Moses Macharia on Instagram. Looking forward to engaging with you.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. And I hope for everyone who has joined, actually today we had a lot of people joining. For everyone who joined, either on YouTube or Zoom, please feel free to reach out to this gentleman or to myself if you need to, ask any question, and I will forward it to the right person. So actually, this brings us to the end of the No Shave November series officially. But next week we have a conversation around what women want versus what men want, still around this topic of men and mental health and No Shave November. And we'll be doing that with two gentlemen. So look out for that video. It will not be a live, it will be a recording. So look out for that video. We'll share it before the month ends. And thank you, everyone. Once again, have a good night. It's a sign off from us. See you next time.
Thank you. See you. Bye.